My name is Evelyn Carter, and I am 66 years old. What I am about to share changed everything I thought I knew about life. The day we buried my husband, Robert, was the quietest day of my existence. Standing beside his grave, I received a text from an unknown number that froze my blood. It said he was still alive, and that the man in the casket was not him. My hands trembled as I typed a reply. I asked who it was, and the message came again, short, urgent, terrifying. They are watching. Do not trust our sons. The world around me seemed to shatter. I looked at Michael and Andrew, my own children, standing near the casket with faces too calm for mourning. Their tears felt rehearsed, their hugs cold and brief. For 42 years, Robert had been my partner, my refuge, the reason I kept breathing. I met him when I was 24 in a small Midwestern town called Maple Hollow. We had grown up on the same dusty streets, both carrying modest dreams that fit inside our hands. I cleaned houses to support my ailing mother, while Robert repaired bicycles in the little shop his father left him. We had almost nothing, yet somehow we had everything that mattered. We had love that was real. I still remember the first morning he spoke to me. It was a Tuesday. I was walking toward the farmer's market in a faded green dress and worn shoes. He stepped from his workshop, grease on his fingers, and smiled with a shyness that melted my heart. He greeted me gently and asked if I needed help with my bike. I did not even own one, but I invented an excuse just to keep talking. That simple conversation turned into shared afternoons beneath the old oak in Maple Hollow Park, into whispered promises, and finally into a small wedding filled with hope. The early years were hard. We lived in a 2-room house with a tin roof that sang when it rained. We set out pots to catch the leaks and laughed about it. Robert worked from dawn to dusk at his shop, while I sewed clothes for the women around town. When Michael was born, happiness overflowed. He had his father's deep eyes and my smile. 2 years later, Andrew arrived just as perfect. I raised them with every ounce of love I had, giving up pieces of myself so they could have more. Robert was a gentle father. He took them fishing on Sunday mornings, taught them how to mend broken things, and told bedtime stories in the softest voice. We were a close family, or so I believed. As the boys grew, things began to shift. Michael, the eldest, was always ambitious. Even as a teenager, he would ask why we lived so modestly, why we did not own a car like the neighbors. Andrew followed him in everything, as he always did. When Michael turned 18, Robert offered him a job at the shop, but he refused with pride. He said he would never get his hands dirty, that he was meant for bigger things. Those words cut Robert deeply, though he never said it aloud. I often found him sitting on the porch at night, staring at the stars with quiet sorrow. His son had rejected not just his trade, but his way of life. The years rolled on, and to my surprise, Michael built a name for himself in business. He found work with a real estate firm in Chicago, and Andrew soon followed. They both began earning money beyond anything Robert or I had ever dreamed of. At first, I was proud. Our sons had achieved what we never could, escaping small-town poverty for city success. But that pride slowly turned to grief. Their visits grew rare, their phone calls shorter. When they did appear, it was in shiny cars and expensive suits, speaking the language of money and investments. They looked at us with polite pity, as if ashamed of the simple life that had once raised them. "Mom," Michael said to me during one of his rare visits, "you and Dad should move somewhere nicer. This house is falling apart." He was right in a way, but every wall held our laughter, our tears, and the echoes of growing children. It was where Robert and I had shared our lives. It was not fancy, but it was ours. It was home. Robert, always gentle and wise, would look at me and say, "Evelyn, money has changed our boys. We are no longer enough for them." I tried to deny it. I kept making excuses for their absence, their brief calls, their forgotten birthdays. They are busy, I told myself, chasing their dreams. But deep down, I knew he was right. We had already lost them long before I lost my husband. I just had not realized how distant we had become. The change became clear when Michael married Lauren Adams, a woman from the city who never hid her discomfort with our simple life. When she came to visit for the first time, her high heels sank into the dirt of our porch, and her red dress looked more expensive than everything in our home combined. "It is so nice to meet you," she said softly, barely touching my hand. Her eyes moved over our living room, judging every worn corner. At dinner, she only pushed the meatloaf around her plate, eating almost nothing. Michael seemed uneasy, apologizing for things that never used to bother him. Next time, he whispered, "We will take them out to eat." I heard every word. Each one stung. Andrew, meanwhile, stayed single but carried the same detachment as his brother. He only came by on holidays, always checking his phone. "Sorry, Mom, I have an early meeting tomorrow," he would say before leaving in a rush. Family Sundays faded into memory. Even Christmas felt cold. They brought gifts we did not need, stayed for a few hours, then left with visible relief. Robert and I aged quietly, finding comfort in each other. He kept repairing bikes, though his hands were weaker, and I kept sewing, though my eyesight dimmed. We lived modestly, never asking for help. One night, as we drank coffee on the porch, Robert said, "The saddest thing, Evelyn, is not that they have money, but that money made them forget what truly matters." He was right. My sons had not only changed their fortunes, but their hearts. We were no longer their parents in their eyes. We had become symbols of a past they wanted to erase. Things grew worse when Michael bought a house worth $200,000 in a gated community. Andrew followed soon after, purchasing a luxury condo downtown. Suddenly, our boys were living lives we could barely imagine. During one of her rare visits, Lauren looked at me with her polished smile and said, "You should sell this place and move into a retirement community. There are some wonderful options for people your age. You would be much more comfortable." The word community hit me like a slap. A retirement community. After 40 years of building our home, after raising our sons with so much love, they wanted to send us away. "We do not need a home," Robert said with the quiet strength that always defined him. "We are fine right here." But I caught the look that passed between Michael and Andrew. They agreed with Lauren. To them, we were no longer parents. We were a burden, an inconvenience they wanted to solve as quickly as possible. That was when the pressure began to grow. One afternoon, Michael showed up with a stack of papers already prepared. "Mom, Dad," he said with that practiced smile of his, "I have been thinking about your future." He sounded so sincere, yet something in his tone felt cold. He told us the house was worth maybe $100,000, and if we sold it, he could add some money to help us move somewhere better. But to us, there was no better place than the home where we had spent our lives. Michael could not understand that. To him, everything had a price tag. Then he added that Robert should retire from the shop. "You are 70, Dad. It is time to rest." Robert looked at him with sadness that said more than words. "Working is not a burden to me, son. It is what keeps me alive." Andrew jumped in, as always, echoing his brother. "You could get hurt, Dad. At your age, an accident would be dangerous." Their voices sounded caring, but there was an urgency behind them, something I could not name then but felt in my bones. The months that followed were heavy. Our sons pushed harder for us to sell. They brought real estate agents without asking, had the house appraised behind our backs, and kept insisting it was for the best. During one tense dinner, Michael said, "Lauren and I are planning to start a family. Things are expensive. If you sell this place and move somewhere smaller, that money could serve as an early inheritance." An early inheritance. He was asking for what would be his after our deaths while we were still alive. I could not even speak. Robert stayed calm, though his jaw clenched tight. "Son," he said, "when your mother and I are gone, everything we own will be yours. But while we are alive, our choices are our own." Andrew cut in sharply, his tone harder than I had ever heard. "You cannot live in the past forever." That night, after they left, Robert and I sat awake until dawn. For the first time in our marriage, we wondered if the sons we had raised had become strangers. "Something is wrong, Evelyn," Robert told me, worry deep in his eyes. "This is not just impatience or greed. There is something darker beneath it." I had no idea then how right he was. I did not know that what was coming was not an accident of fate, but a plan carefully woven by the two people I loved most. The last real conversation I had with Michael was 3 weeks before Robert's death. He came alone, without Lauren, quieter than usual. "Mom," he said, sitting at the same kitchen table where he once ate cereal before school, "no matter what happens, Andrew and I will always take care of you." Those words comforted me back then, but now, remembering them beside Robert's grave, they chill my blood. Why did he say no matter what happens? What did he already know? The accident that changed everything came on a Tuesday morning. Robert had left early for the shop, as he always did, while I was in the kitchen making his favorite lunch, meatloaf and mashed potatoes, when the phone rang, its sound sharp and urgent. "You need to come immediately." The words melted together like ink in water. My heart stopped, my legs gave out, and I clung to the doorframe to keep from falling. What happened? Is he alive? Is he hurt? Is he breathing? "Please come as soon as you can," the voice said. My neighbor, Mrs. Wilson, had to drive me because I was trembling so badly I could not hold my keys. The ride to the hospital was a blur of panic. My thoughts refused to make sense of any of it. Robert was always cautious, so careful with his work. How could something like this happen? When we arrived, Michael and Andrew were already there, which startled me since no one had called them yet. But in my shock, I didn't stop to question it. "Mom," Michael said, pulling me into a tight hug that almost felt real. "Dad is in bad shape. The doctor said there was an explosion in the shop. He has severe burns and head trauma." Andrew's eyes were red, yet there was something off in his face, more tension than grief. "Can I see him?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Only immediate family, one at a time, 5 minutes each," the nurse said. When I entered the ICU, my knees nearly buckled. Robert was covered in bandages, his body lost beneath wires and tubes. Machines kept him breathing. His chest rose and fell with mechanical rhythm. I took his hand, the only part of him that looked whole. "Robert, my love," I whispered, "I am here. You are going to make it through this." I felt a faint squeeze on my fingers. His eyes moved beneath his lids. My warrior was still fighting to come back to me. The next 3 days felt endless. I barely left the hospital, sleeping in the hard chair beside the waiting room window. Michael and Andrew took turns being there, though they seemed more focused on the doctors than on their father. Their hushed conversations made no sense at the time, fragments about costs, policies, and insurance. "Mom," Michael said on the second day, "we checked Dad's coverage. There is a life policy for $50,000 and a workers' comp claim that could reach $75,000. I stared at him in disbelief. Why was he talking about money while his father fought for his life? Why was he calculating instead of praying? "I do not care about the money," I said sharply. "I just want your father back." "Of course, Mom," he answered, but his eyes gave him away. They were cold, empty, the eyes of someone weighing numbers, not emotions. On the third morning, the doctor called us into a small office. Dr. Campbell, a man with kind eyes and tired hands, spoke softly. "Mrs. Carter, your husband's condition is critical. The burns are infected, and the brain injury is severe. We must be realistic about his chances." "What do you mean?" I asked, though my heart already knew. He explained that Robert was in a medically induced coma. They could keep him alive, but the odds of him ever waking up were nearly non-existent. My entire world collapsed. 42 years of love, of shared mornings and laughter, were fading like smoke. "I want to try everything," I said through tears. "Whatever it takes, whatever the cost." But then Michael exchanged a look with Andrew, one that chilled me to the bone. "Mom," he said softly, "we have to think clearly. Dad would not want to live this way. He would not want to be a burden." "A burden," the word tore through me. "He is your father," I shouted, my voice cracking with fury I did not know I had. "He is not a burden. He is the man who raised you, who worked every single day to give you everything he could." "We know, Mom," Andrew said quickly, "but we have to think about you too. The medical bills will be massive. They could drain your savings." Again, it was money, always money. My husband was dying, and my sons were busy counting dollars instead of heartbeats. That night, I stayed by Robert's bed, holding his hand and speaking as if he could still hear me. "My love," I whispered, "they say there is no hope, but I cannot let you go. I cannot imagine this life without you." Then it happened. His fingers tightened slightly around mine. His lips trembled as though he wanted to speak, but no sound came out. I called for the nurses, begging them to look. "He is trying to talk," I cried, but by the time they rushed in, he had gone still again. The nurse checked the monitors and said softly that it was likely an involuntary spasm. But I knew better. I knew what I had felt. Robert had tried to tell me something important before his body betrayed him again. 2 days later, just before dawn on Friday, the alarms went off. Lights flashed red. Nurses sprinted down the hall. I was half asleep in the waiting area when I heard the chaos. "No, no, no," I screamed, running toward his room. For 40 endless minutes they fought to bring him back, but at 4:37 in the morning they stopped. Robert was gone. The pain was unbearable, like my heart had been torn from my chest. I clung to him, his skin still warm, refusing to let go. An hour later, Michael and Andrew arrived. They seemed ready, as though they had known this call was coming. They brought folders, phone numbers, and calm faces. "We already spoke to Maple Hollow Funeral Home," Michael said. "They can take the body this morning." "We also contacted the insurance company," Andrew added. "The paperwork is already in motion." How could they be so composed, so quick, so organized barely an hour after their father died? My grief clouded my mind, but something deep inside me whispered that it was not normal. Still, I let them handle everything. The funeral was set for Monday. Michael arranged everything on his own. He chose the cheapest coffin, the shortest service, as though he wanted it finished quickly. He told me it was what Dad would have wanted, something simple, no fuss. But Robert deserved more than this hurried goodbye. He deserved time, dignity, and love. My protest meant nothing. Everything was already decided. The day of the funeral was cold and gray, as if even the sky mourned him. I wore my old black dress, the same one from my mother's funeral. My hands shook so badly that Mrs. Wilson had to help button the back. "Be strong, Evelyn," she whispered while brushing my hair. "Robert would want to see you strong." But I felt hollow inside, like a body without a soul. 42 years of marriage cannot be buried with a few shovels of dirt. Every corner of the house screamed his absence, his mug on the counter, his tools on the porch, his pillow still holding his scent. When we reached the cemetery, I was struck by how few people had come. Only Michael, Andrew, Lauren, Mrs. Wilson, me, and the pastor stood around the grave. For a man who had spent 70 years in this town, who had helped so many people, it felt painfully empty. "Where are the guys from the shop?" I asked quietly. "We did not want to bother anyone," Michael answered. Dad was a private man, but that was not true. Robert had been loved by everyone. He would have wanted them there to say goodbye. He would have preferred something quiet, but that was not true. Robert loved his neighbors and the small town that had been his home for 70 years. He would have wanted the people he cared for to come and say goodbye. Why had Michael made everything so rushed, so secretive? During the service, I watched my sons with a strange, distant calm. Michael kept his face solemn, but his eyes flicked constantly toward his watch. Andrew seemed restless, as if he had other places to be. Lauren sat beside them, her black veil unable to hide the glow of her phone screen as she typed quietly. That was how they were saying farewell to their father, with distraction and impatience. The pastor spoke of eternal rest, of peace, of joining God's kingdom. His voice floated past me like wind through an empty house. I did not want Robert to rest. I wanted him back. I wanted to see him walk through our door, sit on the porch, and drink coffee beside me every evening. When it was time to throw soil over the casket, my legs refused to move. Mrs. Wilson held me upright as I sobbed uncontrollably. The sound of dirt striking wood broke something inside me. It was the sound of finality, of everything ending. And then, at that very moment, standing over Robert's grave, my phone buzzed in my purse. A text message appeared from an unknown number. "I am alive. That is not me in the casket." My heart froze. The words blurred before my eyes like smoke. I thought I was losing my mind from grief. With shaking fingers, I typed back, asking who it was. The reply came instantly. "I cannot say. They are watching. Do not trust our sons." The phone slipped from my hand as if it were burning. Mrs. Wilson bent down to pick it up, but I stopped her quickly. I could not let anyone else see those messages, not yet. Not until I knew what was real. "Are you all right, Mom?" Michael asked, walking over with concern on his face. I stared at him, searching for any trace of truth or guilt. His eyes seemed kind, but suddenly everything about him felt uncertain. "I am fine," I said quietly, tucking the phone into my purse. "I just need to go home." All the way back, the words haunted me. Was someone playing a cruel joke at the worst time of my life? Or was there a chance, no matter how impossible, that Robert was still alive? If he was, then who had we buried? And if he was truly gone, who knew so many private details about our lives? That night, alone in the quiet house, I replayed everything in my mind. The accident had been strange from the very beginning. According to Michael, a machine in the shop had exploded, but Robert was meticulous. He checked every bolt and cable daily. And how had my sons arrived at the hospital before me when I was the emergency contact? The call had come to me first, so who told them? Then there was the money. From the first day, they had been talking about insurance and beneficiaries as if they had been waiting for this moment. I decided to go through Robert's papers. In his old desk, inside a metal box, he kept every document that mattered: insurance, the house deed, the shop records. That was where I found the life insurance policy. It matched what Michael had mentioned, $50,000. But I noticed something that stopped me cold. The policy had been updated only 6 months earlier, raised from $5,000 to $50,000. Robert had never said a word about that change, and the question that echoed in my mind was who had advised him to do it. I kept digging and uncovered another document, a workers' compensation policy I had never seen before, purchased 2 months before his death. It promised $5,000 in case of a workplace accident and $15,000 for accidental death. It was a small fortune to us, yet big enough to tempt anyone without a conscience. My phone buzzed again. Another message from that same number. Check the bank account. See who has been moving money. This time I did not hesitate. Whoever this person was, they knew too much to be joking. They knew about the insurance, and they knew about my sons. They knew details that only someone very close to us could possibly know. The next morning, I went to the bank Robert and I had used for over 30 years. Mrs. Harris, the manager who had known our family for decades, greeted me with warm sympathy. "Evelyn, I am so sorry about Robert. He was a good man." "Thank you, Mrs. Harris," I said quietly. "I need to review our accounts." She printed the statements from the last 6 months. What I saw made my stomach turn. In the past 3 months, several large withdrawals had been made: $1,000 in January, $3,000 in February, $4,000 in March. I never approved those. "Who authorized these transactions?" I asked, barely keeping my voice steady. "Your husband came in personally," she explained. "He said the money was for repairs at the shop, but that made no sense. I handled every household expense. Robert had never mentioned expensive repairs, and we would have discussed withdrawing thousands from our savings." I asked to see the withdrawal slips. Mrs. Harris brought them out. The signatures looked like Robert's, but something about them was wrong. The letters were shaky, uncertain, not his usual strong handwriting. "Mrs. Loden." "Harris," I asked. "Was he alone when he came in, or was someone with him?" She thought for a moment. "Now that you mention it, I believe one of your sons was with him. Michael, I think. He said he was helping his dad read the paperwork because Robert had trouble seeing without his glasses. Michael had used his father's eyesight as an excuse, but Robert never worked without his glasses. That afternoon, as I stared again at the bank receipts, another message appeared on my phone. The insurance was their idea. They convinced Robert he needed more coverage for you. It was a setup. My breath caught in my chest. The pattern was undeniable now. The increased insurance policies, the unexplained withdrawals, Michael's involvement in every step, his cold precision during the funeral, his impatience at the hospital. The question that terrified me was not just if they had planned it, but how, and who was sending me these messages. How could this person know everything? The following days were a blur of fear and suspicion. Every smile from Michael, every embrace from Andrew, every word of comfort felt like a lie wrapped in affection. Still, I needed proof before accepting something so monstrous. More messages came. "Go to Robert's workshop. Check his desk. There are things you missed." My heart pounded as I decided to go, for the first time since the accident. Michael had said an explosion destroyed the shop, but when I arrived, the place was spotless. Too clean. There were no burn marks, no debris, no sign of chaos. Every machine was in its place. The welder, the compressor, the electric saw, all in perfect condition. Where was the damaged equipment? What kind of accident leaves no trace? I began to search the office. In Robert's desk, I found a note dated 3 days before his death. The handwriting was his. "Michael insists I increase my insurance, says it's for Evelyn, but something feels off. I don't trust his motives." My pulse raced. Beneath it was another note. "Andrew brought more papers to sign, said they were for shop upgrades. I don't understand why he is rushing me. Robert had suspected them. He had sensed their intentions but died before he could warn me. Then, at the bottom drawer, I found an envelope with my name on it. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a letter written in Robert's steady handwriting. My dearest Evelyn, if you are reading this, it means something has happened to me. In recent months, I have seen strange changes in Michael and Andrew. They have become obsessed with money, with insurance policies, with selling the house. Lauren keeps pushing them, whispering in their ears. Yesterday, Michael told me I should be careful, because at my age, even a small accident could be fatal. I do not know why, but those words felt like a threat. I love you, Evelyn. If something happens to me, do not trust anyone completely, not even our sons. The letter slipped from my hands. Robert had sensed his death coming. He had seen the danger I refused to see, blinded by a mother's love. That evening, Michael came by. He brought a bottle of wine and a smile that now seemed rehearsed. "Mom, I have been thinking about your future," he said. He poured himself a glass without asking if I wanted any. "The insurance money, it is already being processed," he said. "It should come to about 15,000. "How do you know the exact amount?" I asked, pretending not to know. "Well, I helped Dad with the paperwork. He wanted to make sure you would be comfortable." It was a lie. Robert had written that he was pressured by his own son. "And what do you think I should do with that money?" I asked, watching his face carefully. His eyes brightened with an eagerness that sent a chill down my spine. "You could buy a smaller house or move into a lovely retirement community. Andrew and I could manage the money for you, make sure you are taken care of. Manage my money." The words tasted bitter. "We only want to protect you, Mom," he continued smoothly. "At your age, it is easy to get tricked or make bad choices. We know about investments. We could even triple that amount in a few years. Triple my money, or make it vanish." "Let me think about it," I said, buying time. "Of course," Lauren added with fake sweetness, "but not too long. For your own good." After they left, I sat in my kitchen, shaking with rage and fear. My own sons, my flesh and blood, had not only taken their father's life, but were now planning to take everything else. That night, my phone buzzed again. The message was longer than usual. "Tomorrow, go to the police station. Ask for the report on Robert's accident. There are things you need to know." The next morning, I went to the Maple Hollow Police Department. Sergeant O'Connor, who had known Robert for years, greeted me kindly. "The report on your husband's accident?" I asked. His expression changed. "What accident, Mrs. Carter?" he said. "From the workshop," I replied. "The explosion." He flipped through the files and frowned. "We do not have any record of an explosion at Robert's workshop. In fact, there is no report of any work-related incident involving your husband." My knees felt weak, but my son said there was an accident. "That is how he ended up in the hospital." The sergeant looked at me gently. "Mrs. Carter, your husband was brought in on Tuesday morning, but not from a work accident. According to the medical report, he was found unconscious with clear signs of poisoning. My breath caught. Poisoning. The doctors found methanol in his blood enough to cause blindness, brain damage, and eventually death. The hospital should have told you. It was not an explosion. It was not an accident. Someone had poisoned him." "Why did no one tell me?" I asked, my voice breaking. The sergeant sighed. "The immediate family who signed the admission forms requested that the information remain confidential to avoid unnecessary worry. They said you were too fragile to handle the medical details." Immediate family. My own sons. Michael and Andrew had hidden the truth about Robert's death, inventing the explosion and deceiving everyone, including me, to cover up a murder. "Mrs. Carter," the sergeant said gently, "if you believe your husband's death was suspicious, we can open an investigation." I had no doubts. I knew deep down my sons had killed their father for money. That afternoon, Andrew came by carrying flowers and wearing the same insincere smile his brother had perfected. "How are you, Mom? You look tired." "I'm fine," I lied, studying his every move with new eyes. "I'm just thinking about the future." "That's good," he said quickly. "Michael and I think you should sell the house soon, while the market is still strong." "Why the rush?" I asked. He hesitated only a second. "Old houses lose value quickly. Mom, and you need cash for expenses, funeral costs, medical bills, lies. The funeral had been cheap, almost shameful, and every medical bill had already been covered by insurance. Andrew, I said firmly, looking straight at him, you knew your father didn't die from an explosion. For an instant, fear flickered in his eyes before he masked it with a smile. What are you talking about, Mom? I went to the police, I said. There is no record of any explosion. This time he visibly faltered. Mom, you shouldn't be doing things like that. They'll just confuse you. Grief is clouding your mind. Grief is clouding me, or you have been lying. He stood abruptly, spilling the coffee I had poured. You need rest. We'll talk when you've calmed down. He left quickly, but through the window I saw him outside on the porch, talking on the phone in a low, frantic voice. That night, my phone buzzed again. The message was clear and chilling. They're coming tomorrow. They'll try to convince you you're losing your mind. Don't eat or drink anything they bring. The warning came true exactly as predicted. The next morning, both Michael and Andrew arrived together with Lauren. Their faces wore exaggerated concern. They carried a white bag from the downtown bakery. Mom, we're worried about you, Michael began in a sweet, unnatural tone. The neighbors say you've been acting strange. Mrs. Wilson told us you've been talking to yourself, not eating. Lies stacked upon lies. Lauren held up the bag. We brought your favorite pastries, she said, and we made your special coffee blend. The words from the message echoed in my mind. Don't take anything they offer. It struck me then, were they planning to poison me too, just as they had Robert? Thank you, I said, forcing a smile, but I already had breakfast. But Mom, Lauren pressed on, her polite smile tight and false, you have to eat. You've lost weight since Dad passed. I'm fine, I said sharply. Michael exchanged a look with Andrew, the same wordless look they had shared in the hospital when the doctor gave us Robert's prognosis. That silent understanding between them chilled me. Mom, Michael said, sitting closer, we need to discuss something important. Henry and I have been talking to doctors about your recent behavior. My behavior, I repeated. Yes, he said. The strange questions, the visits to the police, this fixation on Dad's death, it's normal after such loss, but it can be dangerous. Andrew nodded gravely. We spoke to Dr. Adams. He says it's common for older women to develop paranoia after losing a spouse. Paranoia. They were trying to label me as unstable, to silence me. I am not paranoid, I said, my voice shaking but firm, gathering every ounce of strength left inside me. I am just asking questions I should have asked long ago. What questions? Michael demanded. Like why there is no police record for your father's supposed accident. Why the shop looks untouched if there was an explosion. Why you withdrew $5,000 from our account without telling me. The silence that followed was suffocating. The three of them exchanged nervous glances. Mom, Andrew finally said, there are simple explanations. Dad withdrew that money for repairs. He wanted it to be a surprise for you. What kind of surprise? I asked. Michael jumped in smoothly. He wanted to remodel the house, to fix the roof and paint the walls. He was planning it for your birthday. If that were true, where were the workers, the tools, the paint? No one in town knew anything about this supposed project. And as for the police report, Michael continued, not every work accident needs to be filed, especially on private property. Lies. Sergeant O'Connor had told me himself that all serious workplace injuries required a formal report. Mom, Lauren said softly, her voice dripping with false sympathy. We only want to take care of you. That's why we think you should move somewhere with proper medical support. A home, Michael added, a place for people coping with grief. They have nurses, therapists, and activities to keep you busy. And in the meantime, Andrew said, we can manage your finances. We can sell the house, handle the insurance money, all the difficult things you should not worry about right now. There it was, the entire plan. They would have me declared mentally unstable, put away somewhere, and take control of everything. They had killed Robert for the insurance, and now they wanted what little I had left. And what if I refuse? I asked. Why would you refuse? Michael said with a smile that chilled my blood. We just want what is best for you. Because this is my home, I said quietly. This is where I built my life with your father, where I raised you both. Mom, Andrew sighed. You can't live in the past forever. Dad is gone. You have to move on. I have accepted that he is gone, I said, "but that doesn't mean I will hand over my life and my money." The mask of concern cracked. Michael stood abruptly. "Fine, if you won't listen, we will have to take stronger measures." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means we can file to have you declared legally incompetent. We have witnesses to your erratic behavior and a doctor's testimony confirming your paranoia." "Doctor?" I asked, stunned. "I haven't spoken to any doctor." "Doctor, Adams already signed a preliminary report," Andrew said calmly. "Based on our description of your actions, he believes you need professional care. A doctor who never even met me had labeled me unstable." "How much did they pay for that false report?" Michael's tone grew colder. "You can cooperate willingly, or we will do it legally. Either way, you will get the help you need." It was a threat, thinly disguised as concern. If I didn't surrender my assets, they would steal them through the law. "I need time to think," I said, forcing composure. "Of course," Lauren replied sweetly, "but not too long for your own good." After they left, I sat frozen at the kitchen table, shaking with rage and terror. My own sons, the same boys I once rocked to sleep, had murdered their father and were now plotting to destroy me. That night, my phone buzzed again. The message was longer than any before. "Evelyn, this is Stephen Callahan. I am a private investigator. Robert hired me 3 weeks before he died because he suspected Michael and Andrew. They poisoned him by mixing methanol into his morning coffee. I have recordings of them planning it all. Tomorrow at 3 in the afternoon, meet me at the corner cafe. Sit at the last table near the window. I will be there." At last, I would know who had been sending those messages, and finally, I would have the proof to bring justice for my husband's death. But I also knew time was running out. Michael and Andrew had revealed their intentions. If I hesitated, I would end up locked away while they spent the money that had cost Robert his life. The battle had begun, and even if I was a 66-year-old woman facing 2 ruthless men, I had something stronger than both of them: the truth. And truth, sooner or later, always finds its way to the light. That night, for the first time since Robert's death, I smiled. My husband had not died in vain. His caution, his intuition, his choice to hire a private investigator would be the key to justice. Michael and Andrew had underestimated their mother. They were about to learn that a woman protecting the memory of the man she loved is a force far greater than greed. The next morning arrived with a strange mix of fear and determination. I dressed carefully, choosing my deep purple dress, the one I reserved for serious moments. If I was about to meet the man who held the answers, I wanted to be ready. At 2:30, I walked toward the cafe, my steps slow but steady. Every shadow on the street felt alive. Every passerby looked like they could be watching me. The cafe was half full, the low hum of voices blending with soft music. I went straight to the back table, just as instructed. I ordered a cup of chamomile tea and waited, my hands trembling slightly against the cool wood. Exactly at 3 o'clock, a tall man with gray hair and kind but serious eyes approached. "Mrs. Carter?" he asked quietly. I nodded, unable to speak. "I am Stephen Callahan," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "I am sorry for your loss. Robert was a good man." He placed a brown folder on the table and looked at me with compassion. "Before I show you this," he said, "you should know it will be painful." "I've been ready since your first message," I answered, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. Stephen opened the folder and pulled out a small recorder. "Robert came to me a month ago," he said. "He was worried about his son's behavior and asked me to investigate quietly." He pressed play, and suddenly, Robert's voice filled the air. "Stephen, if anything happens to me, it will not be an accident. Michael and Andrew have been pushing me to increase my life insurance. Yesterday, Michael brought me some papers, supposedly to protect Evelyn, but I saw that the clauses benefited them. Hearing his voice again shattered me, yet it confirmed everything I feared." The recording went on. "Andrew has been asking questions about my daily habits, what I eat, what time I leave, whether Evelyn joins me at the shop. He says it's concern, but the way he asks makes me uneasy." Stephen stopped the playback, letting the heavy silence settle between us like a confession made too late. "That conversation was recorded 3 weeks before Robert's death, but I have something newer," Stephen said quietly. He pressed play again. This time, I heard Michael's voice, cold, certain, unmistakable. "No, we can't wait any longer. The old man is getting suspicious. Yesterday, he asked why I care so much about his insurance. Yes, I already have the methanol. It works perfectly. The symptoms mimic a heart attack or stroke. No, Mom won't be a problem. Once Dad is gone, she'll be too heartbroken to question anything. Tears blurred my vision. It was my son's voice, my own child calmly plotting his father's murder. Stephen's voice broke through my shock. "There's more," he said. "This next one was recorded the day before Robert died." He pressed play again. This time, Andrew's voice came through, steady and cruel. "Everything's ready. Tomorrow, Michael's putting the methanol in Dad's coffee. We told him it's a vitamin powder a doctor recommended. He'll drink it without thinking twice. The symptoms start with dizziness, then confusion, blindness, seizures, coma. The doctors will think it's natural. By the time they realize the truth, it'll be too late." My whole world collapsed. They hadn't just plotted Robert's death, they had carried it out with chilling precision. My sons. The same boys whose hands I had held, whose tears I had wiped away. How could they become such monsters? "How did you get these recordings?" I whispered through my tears. "Robert had asked me to install listening devices in the house," Stephen said. He was scared, though he didn't yet know why. We placed them on the phone lines and in a few hidden spots. He opened a folder and pulled out photographs. "I also have this," he added. The pictures showed Michael leaving a hardware store on Main Street, holding a small bottle. He paid cash and used a fake name, but we caught it on video. The timestamp was 5 days before Robert's death. Stephen laid out more papers. These are their financial records from the last 6 months. They've been spending far more than they earn. Michael owes $70,000 to a city loan shark. Andrew's gambling debts are over $40,000. They were drowning in debt. The motive became clear. It wasn't only greed but desperation. They saw their father as their way out. "Why didn't you go to the police right after Robert died?" I asked. "Because they were careful," Stephen replied. "They bribed the hospital doctor to change the diagnosis. Instead of poisoning, the report says heart failure from work complications. Without that falsified record, my tapes wouldn't hold up in court. But now, with everything combined, we can expose them." I nodded slowly, pain and resolve mixing in my chest. "Exactly," Stephen said. "But there's one more thing you need to know." My blood turned to ice. "What?" "Your sons were planning to kill you too." He played one final recording. Both Michael and Andrew spoke this time. "Once we get Dad's payout, we have to take care of Mom," Michael said. "We can't risk her figuring things out." "How?" Andrew asked. "The same way as Dad, but we'll make it look like a suicide from grief, a widow who couldn't go on. No one will question it. And since we're the only heirs, everything will be ours. The house, the savings, the insurance, almost $200,000 in total." The recording ended. I sat trembling uncontrollably. My sons had killed their father and were preparing to kill me next, all for money. "Mrs. Carter," Stephen said gently, "I know this is unbearable, but now we can make them pay." "What do we do?" I asked, wiping my tears with shaking hands. "First, we take this evidence to the police. Sergeant O'Connor is honest. He's not part of their corruption. Second, we must move quickly. Your sons are planning to have you declared mentally unfit tomorrow. If they succeed, it will complicate everything. Tomorrow morning at 10, they're meeting with Judge Miller to begin the process," Stephen said. I pushed back my chair, a fire rekindling inside me. "Then we act tonight." "Exactly," Stephen said with quiet conviction. For the first time in weeks, I felt strength return to my voice and justice no longer seemed like a dream. "But first, there's one more thing I want you to see," Stephen said, pulling a final photograph from the folder. In it, Robert was walking out of a medical clinic I didn't recognize. 3 days before he died, your husband had a complete physical exam, Stephen explained. The report showed he was in perfect health, no heart disease, no high blood pressure, nothing abnormal. That confirmed it beyond doubt. Robert hadn't died of natural causes. He had been poisoned. That was the last piece of proof we needed. My husband, a strong and healthy man, had been murdered by our own sons. "Stephen," I said, gripping his hand tightly, "thank you for keeping your promise to him. Now, let's finish this." That same night, we drove straight to the police station. Sergeant O'Connor was working the evening shift, which was exactly what we needed. It was 8 o'clock, and the station was quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights. "Sergeant," I said firmly, "I need to file a formal report for the murder of my husband, Robert Carter." "Murder, Mrs. Carter?" "The death certificate says he died of heart complications from a workplace accident." "The death certificate is false," I said, placing the folder in front of him. "My husband was poisoned with methanol by our own sons." For the next 2 hours, Stephen and I presented everything we had collected. The audio recordings, the photographs of Michael buying methanol, the bank records showing unauthorized withdrawals, Robert's clean medical results, and the taped confessions where my sons discussed both his death and their plans to kill me. As the evidence piled up, Sergeant O'Connor's face darkened. When we finished, he leaned back and exhaled slowly. "This is beyond belief," he said quietly. "Are you sure you want to go through with this? Once we arrest them, there's no turning back." "Sergeant," I replied with the calm of someone who had already lost everything, "those men murdered my husband for money. They were planning to kill me next. They are no longer my sons. They are criminals. We'll need the coroner to exhume Robert's body to confirm the presence of methanol," he warned. "Are you prepared for that? Do whatever it takes," I said without hesitation. Without wasting time, the sergeant called the district attorney. Despite the late hour, the DA arrived in person. After reviewing the evidence, he authorized immediate arrest warrants. "We'll move at dawn," the DA said. "We can't risk them destroying evidence." Stephen walked me home afterward. "Are you sure you'll be all right alone?" he asked gently. "I'll be fine," I told him. "After everything I've uncovered, I'm not afraid anymore. Justice is finally on my side." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen staring at Robert's photos on the wall. For the first time since he died, I felt something more than grief. I felt peace knowing justice was near. At 6 a.m, my phone rang. It was Michael. "Mom, you need to come to Andrew's house right away. Something terrible has happened." "What's going on?" I asked, pretending concern. "It's better if I explain in person. Please come quickly." I knew instantly it was a trap. After hearing the recordings, I knew they were trying to move up their plan to silence me. But I also knew the police were already on their way to arrest them. "I'm on my way," I lied calmly. Instead, I stayed in my kitchen and waited. At 7:30, I saw flashing lights outside my window. Several police cruisers split off toward both of my sons' homes. My phone rang over and over, first Michael, then Andrew, each call more frantic than the last. I didn't answer, not one word. Justice, at last, was already on its way. At 9 that morning, Sergeant O'Connor knocked on my door. "Mrs. Carter, we've arrested Michael and Andrew. They're in custody, charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder." My legs trembled, but not from fear this time, it was from relief. "How did they react?" I asked. Michael denied everything until we played the recordings. Then he broke down completely. Andrew tried to run out the back window. It took officers 6 blocks to catch him. That afternoon, Jessica came to see me. She arrived in tears, pleading, nothing like the cold woman I'd known. "Mrs. Carter, please drop the charges." "Michael isn't evil," she cried. "He was desperate." "This is my fault too," she said. "I pressured him to find money." I looked at her calmly, without pity. "Jessica, your husband poisoned mine. He planned to kill me next. There's no excuse for that." "But we're family," she screamed. "Think about what this will do to everyone." "The family ended the moment you all decided to kill Robert for money," I said coldly. "Please, leave my house." 3 days later, Robert's body was exhumed. The lab confirmed everything Stephen had uncovered, lethal levels of methanol, enough to explain every symptom before his death. The case shook our entire town. No one could comprehend how 2 sons could murder their father for money. The newspapers called it the cruelest crime of the decade. As the investigation continued, even more details surfaced. Michael owed $70,000 to loan sharks who had started threatening him. Andrew had lost $50,000 in underground gambling and was being hunted by collectors. They saw Robert's life insurance as their only escape. Their greed had made them reckless enough to raise the policy amounts, and that's what drew Robert's suspicion. It also turned out that the doctor who falsified the death certificate had been paid $5,000 in cash by Michael. He was arrested for obstruction of justice and falsifying documents. Stephen later explained the plan Robert had made. "Your husband was wiser than they ever realized," he told me. "He knew something was wrong, even if he didn't know exactly what. That's why he hired me to investigate them and to protect you if something happened. Did he know they'd kill him? I asked. Not for certain, Stephen replied, but he sensed danger. That's why we recorded everything. He wanted to make sure that if something happened, the truth would survive. Even in his final days, Robert had been protecting me. He had foreseen his son's betrayal and set everything in motion to expose them. The trial date was set for 2 months later. Both faced first-degree murder charges, carrying a possible sentence of 25 years to life. When the day finally arrived, the courthouse was packed with reporters, neighbors, and even strangers who wanted to see justice served. I wore my best black dress, the same one I had worn on our wedding day. It now symbolized loss and dignity. Stephen sat beside me, steady and supportive. His presence gave me courage to face what I knew would be the hardest day of my life. When Michael and Andrew entered in handcuffs, dressed in orange jumpsuits, my heart broke again. But there was no pity left, only a deep sadness for the moral decay that had taken them long before they killed their father. The prosecutor spoke with devastating precision. One by one, the recordings played across the courtroom. Each time their voices filled the air calmly, describing how to kill their father, the silence was unbearable. When the final recording played, the one where they plotted to kill me too, people gasped. An elderly woman stood and left the room sobbing. I didn't blame her. There are horrors that no mother, no person, should ever have to hear, especially when they come from the mouths of her own children. It was almost impossible to comprehend such cruelty. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the prosecutor began, this is not just a story of greed. This is a story of 2 grown men who murdered the father, who raised them with love and sacrifice coldly, deliberately simply to pay off gambling debts and reckless loans. The room fell silent. Michael and Andrew's lawyers tried to paint them as victims of circumstance, men driven by desperation, but the truth spoke louder. The recordings didn't lie, the bank records didn't lie. The medical report on Robert's poisoned body didn't lie. When my turn came to testify, I walked to the stand on trembling legs but with a steady heart. Mrs. Carter, the prosecutor asked, what was your relationship like with your sons before your husband's death? I thought it was loving, I said softly, staring at Michael and Andrew. I raised them with every ounce of love I had. Robert worked his whole life to give them the best we could. I never imagined that love would become the reason for his death. Did you ever suspect they could harm him? No. That is the hardest truth to live with. I trusted them completely. When they said there was an accident at the shop, I believed them. When they rushed the funeral, I thought they were trying to be strong. I didn't see that they were hiding a murder. Michael looked down. Andrew met my eyes, defiant, but I saw tears there. Too late for tears, too late for redemption. The most haunting moment came when the prosecutor played the full recording of their plan to kill me. Michael's voice echoed through the courtroom. Once we get Dad's insurance money, we'll have to get rid of Mom too. We can't risk her getting suspicious. A wave of horror rippled through the audience. Some turned to me in disbelief. Others lowered their eyes in pity. How did you feel when you first heard this recording, Mrs. Carter? The prosecutor asked. I realized I had lost my sons long before I lost my husband, I said quietly. The children I once held in my arms had vanished, replaced by strangers willing to do anything for money. The defense tried to twist my words, claiming grief had clouded my mind, that I had misread my son's intentions. But the evidence spoke for itself. Then Stephen took the stand. He told the court how Robert had hired him out of fear, how he had documented everything, recorded every call, gathered every detail. The medical examiner confirmed what we already knew. The poison in Robert's system was lethal. Methanol attacks slowly, he explained, causing blindness, confusion, and coma before death. The courtroom listened in silence. After 3 long days, it was time for closing arguments. The prosecutor's final words cut like glass. Michael and Andrew are not victims. They are predators. They plotted, executed, and concealed their father's murder. They planned to do the same to their mother. They don't deserve sympathy. They deserve justice. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. The wait felt endless. Every tick of the clock echoed in my chest. When the judge returned, the silence was heavy enough to crush air itself. In the case of the state versus Michael Carter and Andrew Carter, on the charge of first-degree murder of Robert Carter, we find the defendants guilty. The room erupted with gasps and whispers. Michael sank into his chair, his face pale with disbelief. Andrew stayed rigid, his stare fixed on nothing. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder against Margaret Carter, we find the defendants guilty. The judge turned to them solemnly. For the deliberate murder of your father and the plot to murder your mother, I sentence you both to life in prison without parole for 30 years. When I heard those words, I felt the crushing weight of grief finally lift. Justice, real, undeniable justice had come for Robert. Afterward, people came to me one by one to offer hugs and tears. My friend Denise wept with me, not from sorrow but from the deep relief that truth at last had triumphed. "Margot, Ernest can rest in peace now," she whispered to me. That night I went back to my house, and it no longer felt like a place of sorrow. It was home again, the same home where Ernest and I had shared 42 years of happiness. Stephen visited a week after the trial and asked how I was. "At peace," I said. For the first time since Ernest's death, I slept through the night. Justice had been served, and I knew his soul could rest. I decided to give away the life insurance money. That money carried the weight of blood and pain. I donated it to a foundation that helps victims of family crimes. I could never have used it for myself. My own savings were enough for a quiet, simple life. 6 months later, a letter arrived from prison. It was from Charles. He wrote that he was sorry, that greed and debt had blinded them, that they destroyed their family for $5,000 they never even spent. He ended the letter saying he could not live with the guilt. The next day, Charles took his own life. Henry broke down completely when he heard the news and was moved to a psychiatric hospital. 2 years have passed since the trial. I live quietly now in the same small house. I turned Ernest's old shop into a garden filled with flowers I bring to his grave every Sunday. Stephen visits often to check on me, and we have become close friends. Sometimes neighbors ask if I miss my sons. The answer is not simple. I miss the children they once were, but those boys died long before their father did. The men they became were strangers wearing my sons' faces. I have learned that real family is not about blood, but about love, respect, and loyalty. Ernest was my true family for 42 years. The friends who stood by me during the hardest days are my family now. Justice did not bring Ernest back, but it gave me peace. On quiet nights, I sit on the porch where we used to drink coffee, and I feel him there beside me. He is proud of me, I know. Proud that I was strong enough to face the truth, even when it meant losing everything else. 5 years have passed since that day in the cemetery when everything changed. I am now 71, and my white hair carries the storms I have survived. My friend Doris says my eyes shine with a calm they never had before. The house Ernest and I built remains my safe place. I painted the walls a soft yellow, his favorite color, and turned his old workshop into a garden full of roses, carnations, and sunflowers that always seek the light. Stephen Callahan became more than an investigator. He became family. Every Wednesday he visits, and we share coffee and stories on the porch. He sometimes asks if I regret turning in my own sons. Never, I tell him. The truth hurts, but lies destroy the soul. The foundation I created in Ernest's name has grown beyond what I dreamed. The Ernest Hayes Foundation now helps families who, like mine, were torn apart by betrayal and loss. That is how Ernest continues to live on, not in pain but in hope. We now have psychologists, lawyers, and investigators all working so that no family will ever have to endure the silence I once did. 6 months ago, a 40-year-old woman named Ellen came to see me. She believed her brother had murdered their mother over inheritance. Her story mirrored mine: greed, pressure to sell property, and coldness disguised as family duty. The foundation provided her with a private investigator, legal help, and counseling. 3 months later, her brother was found guilty. When Ellen came to hug me, sobbing, she said, "Mrs. Carter, you saved my life. If you hadn't had the courage to turn in your sons, I never would have had the strength to report mine." Moments like that remind me why every ounce of pain I endured was worth it. Andrew is still alive, though the man I knew is long gone. After Michael's suicide, his mind shattered completely. The doctors say he lives trapped in guilt and paranoia, convinced that Robert visits him every night to confront him. He's tried to take his life 3 times, and now he's under constant watch. I still get letters from him rambling, desperate apologies, pleading for forgiveness. At first I opened them, hoping to glimpse the son I once knew, but reading them only tore open wounds that had already healed. Now, I keep them sealed inside a shoebox. Maybe one day I'll read them. Maybe I won't. I've earned my peace. Jessica left town right after the trial. Someone told me she moved to the city and changed her name. I don't blame her. Living with that last name must be unbearable. Sometimes I wonder if she knew what Michael was planning, if she silently watched it unfold. But those thoughts belong to another time. I've learned to live in the present. The town of Willow Creek will never forget what happened. It's become a cautionary tale, a reminder told to children about greed, betrayal, and the danger of blind trust. Some see me as a hero, others as a heartless mother who sent her sons to prison. I no longer care what people say. I know the truth, and the truth gave me peace. My health, surprisingly, has improved with age. The doctor told me the body heals when the heart finally rests. Maybe that's true. The ache that once lived in my chest is gone. Sundays are my favorite. I pick fresh flowers from the garden and walk to the cemetery to visit Robert's grave. His headstone bears the words I chose after the trial. Robert Carter, beloved husband, betrayed father, honorable man. His love was stronger than death. I sit there and tell him everything about the families we've helped, the thank you letters, the lives changed because of him. I swear I can feel his presence in the soft wind that moves through the trees. Do you know what's strange, my love? I said during my last visit. I no longer feel pain when I think of Michael and Andrew. Only pity. Pity that they had all the love in the world and chose hate instead. They had a family that adored them, and they chose betrayal. They had the chance to live honorably like you, but they chose darkness. Last week, a reporter from the city came to interview me for a documentary about family crimes. She asked if there was anything I wanted to say to others facing similar pain. Family is not an excuse for crime, I told her. Real love has boundaries. Love that destroys is not love at all. If someone claims to love you but can harm you for money or comfort, that love is a lie, and it is never too late to seek justice, no matter who the guilty are. This year, on the 5th anniversary of Robert's death, I organized a memorial in his honor. More than 200 people came, neighbors, supporters, and families we've helped. It was beautiful to see how his death, born from tragedy, had become a force for good. Stephen gave the final speech. Robert Carter died because of his son's greed, he said, but his story has given hope to countless others. In that moment, under the golden evening light, I realized something. My husband's life had not ended in tragedy, it had transformed into purpose. His legacy was no longer pain, it was redemption. But his legacy lives on in every family that finds justice through his wife's courage. Evil tried to erase his story, yet goodness turned it into a light for others. At night, before I fall asleep, I sometimes take out the old photographs of Michael and Andrew as little boys, playing in the yard, wrapped in their father's arms, laughing with me around the Christmas tree. I let myself cry for those innocent children who once existed before greed swallowed their hearts. But I no longer cry for the men they became. They chose their path, and they must live with it. My story has grown beyond my personal sorrow. It stands now as proof that justice can rise from even the darkest pain, that truth can bloom from tragedy. A 66-year-old widow showed that truth endures when lies collapse, that love outlasts betrayal, and that it is never too late to do what's right. Tomorrow is Wednesday, and Stephen will come by for coffee as he always does. I'll bake his favorite pastry and tell him about the new thank you letters that arrived this week. Afterward, we'll work in the garden together, planting fresh flowers for spring. Life moves on quieter, simpler, but more genuine than ever. I've learned that true family isn't defined by blood, but by shared kindness, trust, and the kind of love that never harms. Robert, wherever you are, I hope you know I kept the promise I made at your grave that terrible day. I found the truth. I fought for justice, and I turned our pain into hope for others. Your death was not in vain, my love. Did you like my story? And where are you listening from? Tell me in the comments. If this story touched your heart, you can show your support by sending a super thanks. It helps me create more stories like this one. Thank you for being here and for your kindness. I can't wait to read your thoughts below. On the screen you'll find 2 more true life stories I think you'll love. There's so much more to discover, so don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next story.